If brand and art is the cool, sexy side of marketing, then I guess that makes science the dorky, unattractive stepchild of advertising. And while some people may think marketing experiments sounds like a lot of fun, doing the actual rigorous testing and analysis required for a valid, statistically significant marketing experiment can be sometimes rather boring, arduous, and monotonous. My guest today is someone who gets to use $4 million in R&D budget to run sometimes maybe some boring marketing experiments that have really big impacts or no impacts, but in a way teach us a lot either way. He is someone that can be found on LinkedIn cutting fruit while teaching his followers about marketing and business. Tim Davidson is the cool, charming lacrosse player, animal enthusiast turned marketer who is on a quest to make marketing experimentation #LitAF, brah. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Travi, thanks for having me.
Hey!
Easily the top 5 best moments of my life. I've done some cool things.
You've done some really cool things. You've traveled the world a bit. You've lived in other parts of the world.
Have, a little bit. Yeah, you did your research. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I know a lot about you.
It's going to get good.
It's going to get good, man.
Okay.
To get the episode kicked off, I have a clip that is I want to get us inspired about why we should all love science from Hank Green, who I was surprised to know you aren't familiar with, but you will be after this. Let's watch the clip.
I fucking love science. Can you even imagine? Way back in the past when we thought that storms were caused by petty gods fighting on top of a mountain. And yeah, I like a good story, but eventually it's gonna bore me if it doesn't have that truth, that incontrovertible, testable, repeatable proof. I fucking love science, and I fucking love Charles Darwin, cause I don't think it's bold to question what you're told if you're told that the world's 1,000 years old. There's nothing here to argue against, it's a process, not an ideology.
You can pause it there. Do you fucking love science, Tim, as much as Hank does?
No, I don't think so. Never.
Yeah, I just wanted to get us hyped. I found that video. I think he released that like over 10 years ago.
Oh, okay.
It stuck with him for a while. But I think on today's episode, it's fitting. We're talking about experimentation and marketing.
I get you.
I think
I see you did there.
You see what I did there?
I get it. Yeah. Pretty good. Pretty good.
For our first segment today, I want to address the misnomer that I often think that experimentation is exciting. And to get that point across, I have another clip to open this segment up. Let's go ahead and roll that one.
It's like looking after a garden. I'm useless as a gardener, by the way. But if you don't like the weeding, it's very difficult to be a good gardener. You have to sort of like actually growing the bacteria or making the DNA or whatever it may be. You know, most of science is boring, repetitive things, and the only reason why it becomes interesting is because you have your eye on a remote goal.
I feel like I've watched a couple of your videos and heard you talk about your experiments, and I get a similar sentiment. It's like the goal and like keeping your eye on the prize is important, but the actual work of it, when I asked you, like as we were prepping for this, you're like, yeah, dude, like I've done a lot of testing. And you did not sound excited about it. But in your videos, you do sound excited about the results, whether it was positive or negative.
Yeah.
So my first question is, how do you not fall asleep every time you have to run a marketing experiment?
Well,
You don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
no, I mean, I think the thing that keeps you going is actually that one, right? The one thing you can talk about because it actually works out or it doesn't. You either want it on both sides too. It's like either like, oh, it actually really worked. Let's talk about it and let's keep it going. Or it really failed and we can actually have, now that if you do it right, you have that failure, you can actually create content about it if you want to talk about it because that actually, it gives you a little bit extra of the failure. So even though you failed, you spent all that money, you can still do something with it and get some sort of, engagement or whatever that is because of it.
Yeah, share the learnings with people
Exactly.
who maybe are thinking similarly and don't want to make the same mistakes as you.
Yeah, I mean, especially in like B2B marketing, sales, there's not much you can really do. It's everyone's doing like the same thing.
Yeah.
If you could tell how you did this one thing and it failed, it could probably save some people a lot of money.
You're like B2B marketing's like guinea pig.
I'll take it. Yeah, that's fair.
I want to ask a question about you and the Directive team. I heard you mention, I think on another podcast interview, I don't know if it's still actively going, but you and the team have been like, hey, we're going to allocate a big budget towards experimentation. And I'm curious, like, how did you and the team decide, like, this is important for us? And how did you be like, yep, that's what we're going to do now?
Yeah, so we're a marketing agency. So we have clients, right? And clients come and go. And the ones that really stick with us, because we're not cheap, we're a higher price point. The ones that stick with us, they need that innovation. And instead of spending our clients' money, who pays us, we decided we're going to spend the money on ourselves, test it, and we also will have a better testing experimentation flow and have a better reaction to it. Like if we lose money, it's on us rather than the client losing money. So we can actually like almost build it into, all right, we can spend this money. If it works, that's great for us. It's going to turn into the things we want. If it doesn't, it was a test. That's a kind of a weird phrase to say, but like it was a test. It's how we get to the bigger things. So it's actually what kind of also makes us different. We can actually use it to actually innovate for our clients, which then they'll stay with us and make us more money. So we can actually almost write off the tests.
And I feel like that also gives you, as an agency, just like a way to show like, hey, we're a little bit different. We have a differentiator, which is like we do a lot. We're really focused on innovation. We spend our own money on experimenting. We've run the tests that I think you might be interested in. Here's what we found, and here's why we recommend going this route as opposed to this route.
Yeah,
whatever it might be.
Yeah, we use it in sales pitches all the time. It's a value point for us. It's a way to stick out. Because I mean, if you think about it, if you're not doing your own marketing, you can't market yourselves. You probably shouldn't be a marketing agency.
Do you feel like the people who have no experience with statistics or experimenting, like how do you get them to start doing proper experiments? Like I have very little knowledge of like the scientific method. And so sometimes as I was getting ready for this episode, I was like, oh God, I have to go back to like, what is variant versus control? I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
So how do you talk with people maybe that are new to the company? Like, hey, you need to be running experiments, or clients who are not used to running experiments. How do you kind of formulate those conversations?
Well, one, it's not as complicated as, looking at all these, variant, the data points and all that. It's really not that complicated. You don't have to run this huge analysis. A lot of times it's just like, all right, here's this one thing, here's the other thing. Which drove more of the outcome you're looking for? Mm-hmm. And that could just be a certain number. It doesn't have to be this really statistical thing.
Yeah.
There's obviously things you can look at of like leading metrics or, why did this go up and this not that led to this? But you really don't. At the end of the day, let's just look at the numbers we actually want, the outcome we want, and did it work or not? And sometimes, yeah, it's super close. So maybe you need more time or you need to make an optimization or a change, but it's really not as fancy as like the scientific method. It's really just did it work or not?
Yeah, I like the way you break that down, and I think it can be intimidating for people who are approaching it. And I was having conversations with people internally at my own company, and they're like, it sounds like you just want to do some like light exploratory experiment. It was like her nice way of putting like, you don't have like an A/B methodology set up, do you? And I was like, no, I don't. And she was like, all right, let's just simplify this for you. I want to share a slide that our experimentation program director at PandaDoc, so some background, we just started really getting like our experimentation arm. You'd think, we've been doing this for years and years, but actually we've really only been, at least in the marketing department, actively doing experimentation from like an organized perspective for like 6 months to a year. And I saw this slide as she was, Jenny Pack is our program director, about experimentation at PandaDoc. And I wanted to go over it with you and see which parts kind of like stood out the most to you or like good mindsets to have. And then I'll share with you like one or two of my favorites. She had a slide that she put together of like how to build an experimentation culture. And she had a bunch of bullets which read a learning mindset, rewards are consistent with values and objectives, humility trumps hubris, experiments have integrity, the tools are trusted, exploration and exploitation are balanced, ability to embrace a new leadership model. So any of these kind of stick out to you as like, yeah, you got to have that, or experimentation's not going to work with your organization?
Yeah, humility sticks out wildly here because there's going to be a lot that fail. It always is. It's kind of just like investing or really like anything. You're going to have a bunch that fail, but it's the ones that work that have that make up for all those failures. Oops. That make up for all the failures, and that's how you're going to actually win. The humility, you have to have that humility. If you go into a test like, oh, I don't want to fail, you're never going to do it because a lot of the ones that actually do work are the ones that when you look at it, you're like, there's no way, but it does.
I think there's a culture in the corporate world of like being very hush hush about your failures. I understand when you are a publicly traded company, you know, how recalls can affect your stock price. And I've been watching a lot of Succession lately, so I get it. I understand, like, you know, you need to make sure your shareholders are happy, and that's the way a lot of companies are run. But when it comes to like privately held companies and bootstrapped companies or, you know, ones who don't quite have that level of risk at hand, I think there's still like this, don't share what we did wrong. And you've been pretty open about experiments that you've run. One that comes to mind is you invested $30K in some podcast sponsorship ads. And you were very open about like, yeah, it didn't work or it didn't give us the outcome we wanted. Do you mind like telling me how you have the confidence to share this, whereas other companies just don't? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I think I just don't. I don't believe in like the perfectionist thing. Everyone knows no company's perfect. Everyone bounces around jobs. And they're like, oh yeah, this company's gonna be different. They're not. They're all the same. They all have their imperfections. Yeah, some might have better leadership. Some might have better, whatever that is. But they're all imperfect. And what's funny is like you're asking me that, meaning like no one else is really doing that. So why not? I just don't see the downside in it. Okay, yeah, they saw that we spent money and failed. I actually think that's a good idea. I think that shows that we're actually trying things and going to get that innovation. Because I also shared the things that we did win. And if I just shared wins, they're going to be like, well, that's crap. There's no way you always win.
Yeah. I think that builds trust and transparency with you as a creator. And then people look at it and he's like, oh, he works for Directive. They must be like cool with him sharing this stuff. That must be like a very forward-thinking company. I think it's a win-win for a lot of companies. Maybe there are specific scenarios, like if you did fumble client money or like.
There's things, yeah. Like I'm not going to put out like things that we shouldn't talk about for sure. Like, don't get me wrong. That said, I do have the trust with my leadership that I can go about the approach of the ask for forgiveness, not permission. It just makes things faster. But I've built up the trust. I've never said anything that I definitely shouldn't have talked to out. So I'm at that point. You know, maybe you should ask first and then just start doing it. But it's some of the stuff I shared. It's like I really don't see the downside.
I think one of the ones that I liked here as well, I did highlight humility trumps hubris, but another one that Jenny gave some more color to was rewards are consistent with values and objectives. And she wrote, encourage experimentation and embrace failed experiments, which means do not incentivize wins as an organization. This mixed signaling can discourage the experimentation mindset for employees that feel like mistakes or failed experiments put their performance at risk. The organization needs to leverage experiments to achieve the overall business goals, so there's no connection between the experiments and what they're trying to achieve. Experimenting for the sake of experimenting is kind of what she said. So like, I think there's something here about like embracing failure and not like slapping people on the wrists when it's like, hey, we were just trying something new. But I think it can be a fine line, and I think frontline workers or individual contributors are really scared of like facing the consequence.
Yeah, it's a tough one. You do have to build a culture around that. And And even if so we have like a Slack channel. It's like celebrate the fails, and we'll purposely put in things we just made a mistake on. And if you show that, then others will follow. Be like, oh, okay, this person did it. I thought they never would share that. We can do it too. You have to build up that culture, because if someone's going to be scared to fail, you'll never get the innovation. Never.
What was that channel called?
Celebrate the fails.
I want to build that at PandaDoc now. That is awesome.
And you can make fun of yourself, or it's always fun. It's always fun.
Some good self-deprecation.
Yeah.
I think that transparency needs to start from the top down. It needs to come from like executive leaders, owners of a company, and just show like, hey, like we're all human. We all make mistakes. Let's celebrate the fails. Whenever I get like an apology email from like a newsletter I'm a part of, like we made a mistake or like we shouldn't have said that, I almost always write them back and be like, don't worry, I've made like worse mistakes. You're doing fine. Keep going.
Always.
How do you recommend maybe smaller marketing teams that are listening, and maybe there's like 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, how do they get started with like experimenting? You're at a whole nother level with a huge budget of doing it, but yeah, if you're a smaller team, like how do you get started?
So even though we do have a big budget for it, we do have a smaller team. We're like 8 people in our marketing team. So I actually think smaller teams are better because you have less cooks in the kitchen. There's less people giving. There's sometimes I won't even put a test like in a Slack channel and say like, yeah, what are your thoughts? Because you get so many thoughts. There's too many people saying
too many
things.
thoughts.
Way too many thoughts. And a lot of it is just like stuff that doesn't make any sense. You need to be open on that part. But so I do think it's better with smaller teams. But one thing you could do, and especially if it's a smaller organization, or take whatever's working and how do you take that part of it, keep it going, right? Keep spending your resources, time on that so you can keep driving the things that matter to your business, whatever it's opportunities, revenue, or whatever that key metric is. But then take a small either resource, time, budget, or whatever that is and making a variation of it. It's just a little bit different. Then that'll trickle down, because as you have something that's already working, you make a variation of it. Does it work or not? And then you can keep going from that. So like I would just, and also do things that are free. So that could be like try maybe TikTok. It's a free channel, right? You're just doing a resource. So don't spend money first. Test things that are free to post on or free to do, and then you can start spending a lot of money on them.
That's a really good piece of advice, and I think I've seen you share on a TikTok video and on LinkedIn that if you want to try something at your company, you can maybe even try it on a personal level first. Like, hey, I want to make a TikTok for our company. Okay, cool. Why don't you try making a TikTok for you first, proving that it works for you and the topics you're talking about, and maybe they're somewhat related to your business, and then show that proof as like a proof of concept to the team, being like, what if we translated this to like our company? So I think it's great advice to like start with something that's working, start with something that doesn't cost anything except for your time, and then just go from there.
Yeah, no, exactly. That thing works all the time, especially like, and I think that example is TikTok. A lot of companies didn't want to do it because they didn't think their buyers there. Great. Why don't you just post about talk about marketing and see what the comments and the people liking it. Is it your company's buyers? Great. That's the easiest proof ever.
Yeah.
They didn't have to take any time. They didn't have to spend any money. It's always better to come and pitch something when you have the proof first, and then you can get like buy-in on resources, time, whatever that is.
A proof of concept to show them instead of just like a pie in the sky of like, look what so-and-so's doing. We want to do that too. It's like, no, look what I already did.
And then you already have those learnings.
Yeah.
Then you can keep those going on the company level.
I like that idea of taking what's already working, making a small iteration on it too, so that nobody's going to be like, well, why did you do this? You're like, well, it was already working. Like, I just wanted to tweak it to see if it could work even better.
Yeah.
We kept the other thing going, like less risk there. Okay. For our next segment, I want to talk about experiment results that surprised you. So I did a little bit of digging, going all the way back to what seems like forever ago, 2020. You wrote an article on testing Google Ads bidding strategies, maximize conversions versus manual CPC, ... The results were humbling. Can you tell me and the audience a little bit about this study that you did, this test and experiment that you ran, and the results, why they were humbling as well.
So I think this was back in 2019 or so. This is actually before I was even at Directive, and I was just a Google Ads manager. That was everything I knew. I was going to be the HVAC marketer of the world, and lawyers, law firms too. And that was my innovation. It was the small innovation I was kind of doing, right? I was just doing different bidding strategies, AI-enabled bidding strategies before AI became a thing through Google. So I was able to, do those tests, and they were humbling because what I thought would actually work, and this is 2019. I didn't even know what I was talking about. I was just babbling on the internet. And it was just humbling because I thought, my hypothesis, I think I even told some of the team, like, oh, this is going to work. This is
I'm going to beat the robots.
Yeah, I'm going to beat the bots. And I didn't. Nope.
No.
Not at all.
I think on that article, you even showed like, you were like, it's fighting Irish green for the robots. I was like reading that whole article.
It was also when I got into Canva, so I was doing some cool art.
Hey man, I like it. You were making thumbnails like YouTubers of 2023 way back then. So trendsetter.
Yeah, like the clip art Canva. Yeah. I loved it.
What did running that experiment teach you? Other than the robots winning.
Yeah, I think, and I started doing like a kind of like a small series of testing things like that. But it was just you can create the content from it. So whatever the test was, you can actually create content whether it works or not. So you can actually learn from it, but also how to actually like explain it and like what you should actually learn from it. But also that what you think is going to work doesn't work. And I kind of knew that, but it's like getting it out there and actually talking about it and actually getting my thoughts on paper or computer. That was very helpful, even though I stopped doing it for a couple of years until I started back up. But it was helpful to just understand how to put your ideas out there and like talk about them.
I think when people are like wanting to post on social media about their profession, whether it's on LinkedIn, Instagram, they're like, well, I don't know what to write about. It's like, well, what are you working on?
Yeah.
Just write about what you're
Day-to-day.
working on as if you're explaining it to somebody outside your industry. And if you can, try to add a little bit of spice to it to try to make it interesting so they can follow along and talk about what you learned. I think that's a great idea. And I know you're always talking about like how to create content in an interesting and engaging way. What are other experiments that you've run over the years where the results kind of surprised you?
So, all right. So this was in like 2020. Contrary to everyone's LinkedIn feed, and I know that everyone has like some moral qualms about this sometimes, the gift cards for meetings blew my mind. I remember it was pitched, and I was like, this is never going to work.
I think I read a tweet where you were like, I don't want a $15 gift card for your demo. Please leave me alone.
I think it was for a review.
Okay.
But yeah, so it was a little different.
A little different. Keep going.
I think it was $5, so like even worse. But we were essentially offering like $100 gift card for a meeting, a sales meeting. And we got tons of meetings at first, right? And it was great, but we didn't close anything for 6 months. But we did about out of iterations in between it. So like, and just to kind of fast forward, right now, I mean, I've spent like $2.5 million in ad spend and gift cards, and it's returned like $11 million in new business revenue.
Dude.
So it's like blown my mind. But then the iterations within that are even more interesting because the gift card was working, $100, right? Then we started testing like $50 gift cards, $500 gift cards, $750 gift cards, $105, $150. The $100 to $105 is the greatest thing I've ever seen because the conversion rate on the $105 is so much better than the $100. And it makes no sense to me, but it's just like, it works. It blows my mind.
Maybe it's just over that like $100 mark. I have no idea. I'm just guessing here.
No, I forgot about this part. We tested $110. 105 won. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. I don't understand it, but it works.
Bro, I would take $105 to take a sales meeting.
With me, is what you're saying. No, definitely not with me.
But and I think where like people are like, oh, okay, well you booked meetings, but then you were saying like, no, actually it returned like 11 million.
It's a huge driver. And I mean, some of the clients we've closed from it, like the brands, who the CMO is, and we got them from a $105 gift card on freaking Instagram. The craziest thing I've ever seen. I don't understand it, but no, I do understand it now, and it's taking time, but it's so crazy. Another one that's been interesting to me, I love this one. So within that, and other things too, even on our website and things like that. So what most companies would say is like a demo is our intro call. We just call it, take a 30-minute intro call with us. So we tested 30 minutes versus 29 minutes. In 29 minutes, blew it out of the water. Craziest thing. And our calls usually take like 25 minutes, so we're not scamming anyone out of their minute. But it's the craziest thing I've ever seen. And now it's going on our website. 29 minutes is everywhere now. The 29 minutes versus 30 minutes is outperforming it by a lot. It's so crazy. It's because it's different. And my hypothesis is that it's different. And it sticks out. And I've had people ask me about it. So like, I'm marketing to marketers, so there might be something to that too.
Yeah.
But it's been so interesting.
Wow. I read someone that wrote the pattern interrupt. It was Michael Reichison, I think is his name, and he was talking about how like all videos now are just like the exact same.
Yeah.
All everybody's like optimized.
Mr. Beast actually.
Mr. Beast, as we were talking about before, is optimized exactly how to make a video. So all videos look the same with like the big jumping out captions with the green highlighter, like following the word you're saying, the quick transitions or whatever. And it's just like, when the pattern interrupt becomes the pattern, then what? Like,
I think they call it Mr. Beastified. It's like every video is like becoming that, and they're all doing the same kind of. It's so interesting.
Yeah. I want to show you a quick clip because there's this story about the guy kind of who created the Apple Store concept. His name's Ron Johnson, and he came in and he went to go work for JCPenney. And he broke what I think are some of the golden rules of business experiments that you and I have touched upon a little bit, but we'll get deeper into here. Let's watch the clip.
All of us have a natural tendency to overgeneralize from small sample sizes. So if you've done something once and it worked well, we tend to believe that we can do the same thing again another time. And dare I say that could have been part of the downfall of Ron Johnson. Was that experience at Apple the right experience to lead a company like JCPenney? And there are, again, people, including Mr. Altman in the room, knows a lot more about this than I do, but is the brand, the image, the reputation, the price point, the nature of the products, are they so similar across these very different companies that you can apply a model that worked really well with Apple stores to a different scenario? And I think that was one of the things that got Ron Johnson into trouble.
So the story is basically he tried to implement a bunch of stuff, obviously, that had worked in the Apple stores, and then he had I think a 17-month tenure as the CEO of JCPenney. And all of his ideas flopped. And so shout out to Jenny Pack. Again, I mentioned her earlier from PandaDoc, but she shared this story with us about just because something worked in one place for one specific business does not mean that it necessarily translates to other businesses. So I can't wait to see a bunch of people being like, we're going to implement the 29-minute demo. The call to action, on their website, hey, take a 29-minute call with us. And you're like, hey, that didn't work for us. And you're like, hey, man, it worked for us. I didn't say it would work for you. You always have to have that disclaimer.
Oh, yeah. Especially if you're cybersecurity and if you market to marketers and then you're marketing to a cybersecurity person, you have to have way different approaches. Yeah. People don't get that sometimes. It's just I'm going to do this. So no.
So I think that leads me to a question that you're already answering, which is just what else have you learned about experimentation in general and how we interpret the results and maybe faux pas that you see people make and get super any commentary you have on just there seems to be a lot of divisiveness on certain experiments.
Yeah. So you might, especially if you're going through LinkedIn, you might hear about it an experiment or a tactic that someone tried, it doesn't work, or SEO's dead, cold call, all that stuff. But that's because it didn't work for them. So there's going to be experiments that, the podcast sponsorship you mentioned, that didn't work for us. I know why. It was the approach. If we did it differently, it would probably be different. We haven't tried it again, but I know podcast sponsorships work for others. So the thing that doesn't work for others or the thing that does work for you isn't always going to work for everyone else. Even if it's the same people you're marketing to, your brand's different. Microsoft would test different things than, I don't know, Joe Schmo off the street, because they have a different brand equity to it. So I think that's a big one. But the other one is that just because you tested something and it didn't work, doesn't mean that test should be completely dead. There might be something. There's a lot of times there's something within it that you just didn't do right or didn't approach it right, that if you changed, it would actually work. So sometimes there's going to be tests that just didn't do well, but you need to, instead of just like cutting it completely, make a small change and it can actually work.
It's interesting because I feel like I've been in situations and conversations where I've joined a company and I've been like, hey, have we ever thought about doing this? And somebody who's tenured and been there's like, you know what? We've tested it and it didn't work. And then what I've started to see within my own organization, because there's people who have been there for like 6, 7, 8 years at PandaDoc, and then there's people who are coming in somewhat new. And so there's little bit of that tension that's occurring. And one thing I think that Jenny and then people with an experimentation mindset do really well is they say, okay, well, do you have documentation of the results? Because I'd love to see like what exactly didn't work. Or just like what exactly you did test. And then I think that's where people are like, oh, well, no. And you're like, okay, well, then I can't just take your word for it. Like, I'm going to need to see the proof because we may want to tweak some things from your original experiment. And I think that's an important part to having like an experimentation culture in your organization.
I think that's also a good point, that the timing. So like someone that's been there for 5 years, oh, we tested that 5 years ago. Things change.
Things do change.
I've made that mistake. Oh, because I've been a director for 3 years. There's things that someone would bring up, be like, hey, I want to test this. I'm like, oh yeah, I tried that 2 years ago. And I was like, well, actually, they just kept going with it. It worked.
Yeah, that's that hubris piece that we're talking about. Humility, hubris.
And you just, I always just laugh at it. I'm like, oh, well, shoot, yeah, I was completely wrong.
I
Good
got
job.
proved wrong.
Great job. But some people don't want to do that.
One quick experiment I want to share with you, and I'm sure you run into this a bit when you're working with certain clients when they're trying to test stuff. We did a test on our homepage. I actually have an image pulled up here. It doesn't show all the results, but it is a template that we use. I want to start testing like PandaDoc. I want to start testing like Directive. This is a card that we use when we're like building a deck and we're presenting it to other team members of just like, what was the description of it? What was the control? What was the treatment? You state your hypothesis. You have some stuff to fill in about your test design, like the dates. What was the sample size? What platform did you use? What was your primary metric you were measuring? So we tried to get, and we've gotten really organized. So shout out to like especially people on our product team who I think helped, our product marketing team who helped share this with us on the regular marketing team. But we did a cool experiment last year in 2022 where we used this card, and I was reading it. Some of the stats are we tested a whole new design for our homepage and saw a 5.6% increase in conversion rates. It was an A/B 50-50 split test with like 60,000 website visitors as the sample size. And we're like, oh, cool. And we're like, wow, this is great. And then our really smart people were like, yeah, but we're going to test it again with some variations like you've been talking about. Like just because it worked once doesn't mean that it's going to work again. And so then in the second test we ran, it like we were like, uh-oh. We were running it for a short period of time, so it wasn't like super impacting our funnel, but it did have some red flags that popped up and it flopped as an experiment. And the message here from this example is like, don't trust one-time experiment results as like the end-all be-all. Like, it worked once, it's going to work forever, that's it. It's like, no, you got to run it a few more times to see if this was an anomaly. Or I think that's the other thing, too, that people don't realize with, like, pseudoscience is it's not repeatable. An experiment that's not repeatable, it's not, statistically significant. It's you can't use it. It's false. So we ended up finding out it was, like, little things like, oh, we had a whole new design and it was showing off our product a lot more. And that worked really great for that first variation. And then the second test, we realized that certain things like our G2 reviews and trust radius reviews really helped increase conversion rates, and having like quotes from people and then having like recognizable logos. Like without those things, our homepage conversion rates like tumbled. So we were like, let's put those back in. And so now we have like a combination of all these variants, and it's performing really well.
Makes sense.
So that's our little kind of nerdy moment for you on like something we've tested. The last part I want to talk about with you, and again, more general here, is a lot of times businesses glorify like disruptive ideas. You see it on LinkedIn. People like, they get super hyped up about like some innovative ideas. And again, for the third time mentioning her, Jenny from our organization.
Jenny Pack. Shout out, Jenny. You're going to have her come on the podcast. She said, businesses often glorify disruptive and innovative ideas a bit too much, and that most impactful progress is actually achieved by implementing hundreds or thousands of minor improvements found over a long period of time during tons of experiments. And I saw you created a TikTok that we're going to roll here in just a minute, talking about hype growth strategy, I think is what you called it. You're like cringing, like, oh God, what did I say? And very on brand, you're here cutting fruit in the woods. You've got your camel pack on, so you're staying hydrated, which I'm glad to see. Let's roll a clip and let's watch it together.
There's only two types of growth strategies. First one is the hype piece. It looks amazing. You spend tons and tons of time on it. Arrows and clip art everywhere. You got landing pages for each company, each person, based on the time of the day, based on the month, based on how they fail after they eat. It's this huge recycled looking little logo type of thing. It's really cool. Someone goes to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to this page, to this page, this page, and this page. And then they all can join, and then they get an email cadence from MySpace. It's like this crazy cool thing. You want to print it out, put it on the fridge right over all your kids' drawings. This is the piece of resistance. So you go to present it, and the crowd goes wild. The CEO does that chair pushback thing and then walks around the chair.
So I wanted to walk
You
around.
got the head of marketing taking screenshots, sending to all the kids. You got the CMO like, oh my, what? It's the best thing that's ever happened, right? And then you got the simple strategy. You don't spend as much time. You do your research, right? You think it through, but it's basically, all right, what's working? How do we make that better? How do we make what's not working work? Or just stop it all together, spend more time, effort, resources on what's working. Nothing complex. It's simple. Maybe you introduce something new. The execs aren't like wowed. They're just like, oh, okay. And you do it, and it works. Having worked with hundreds of clients, building tons of growth strategies, the simple ones usually work better than the complex, overdone hype pieces. They look better on the fridge, though.
Dude. So first of all, great video. But yeah, anything else you want to add to like your message of what you want marketers to take away from the simple versus the hype? I think you said it really well there, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they always look great. You got the pitch deck, and it just, you got arrows everywhere. It looks great. It looks amazing. Everyone gets pumped up too. But then, one, you usually don't have enough resources. You just like hyped it up for no reason, because then you don't have enough resources, or you didn't expect the resources you needed. It's usually time. Or you really can't do that because the Salesforce integration doesn't work. Whatever that is. So you get everyone pumped up, and then it's actually worse because it never works. It's always the simple ones that do a lot better. The only problem with that is no one gets pumped up. No one is like, especially from the agency side, they're like, oh, we pay you for this? Like,
Yeah, you're like, here's what we're doing.
You have to wait 3 months for things to actually go out and perform before you can be like, yeah, told you so. But like, you can't really say that either. So it's always a tough situation, but it's always the simple ones, even within the tests, the strategies that work a lot better. You should always have like the way to kind of think about that is you could do like a mix of it. You could have like 80, the 80-20 rule, right? The 80% that's working on the things that are great, make those little small innovations. Maybe 20% of the time, resources, budget is on like those bigger kind of initiatives.
Sexier
Yeah, the ones that actually get people going.
Yeah.
It gets the people going.
It's the CEO to push his chair out.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Oh, yeah. The high fives in the background, the Zoom high fives. Oh, yeah. That said, what ends up happening there is you don't give people enough time to do the 20%. So never actually happens.
Dude, that is such a perfect picture that you drew, because we have these meetings that just started like in the last, I want to say like 6 to 8 months, where once a month we get together, and the performance marketing team reports on, and that same little like template I showed you with all those details, and it's somebody reading off all that stuff and explaining the study, and I just hear the crickets. And I'm over here jazzed. I'm like, this is amazing. We have actual legitimacy and like scientific like method. This is so dope. I want to like show this to the world. And then just like I see the calendar invites are getting more and more X's. And I'm like, no, like these are so important though, but they're not sexy.
Yeah.
And so I think that, I think chasing the shiny objects and having the super hype performance growth stuff should be a small part of your strategy. And like you said,
you need those though. You do need those because those, you just can't spend all your time on them. Yeah. You actually, for the most part, you don't even get the time to do that.
Yeah.
But you do need those because if you think about there's not one company that growth goals don't increase. And in B2B especially, everything you do now impacts 2 months from now. So if you're not thinking about like the change, the innovation, it doesn't have to be this huge innovation, but smaller innovations, now you're not going to hit your growth goals because they never stop. They always get bigger. You can't just magically turn something on and it's going to work. You need to start innovating like right now.
Not every company should or can have all of their marketing efforts look like a liquid death campaign where you're getting Tony Hawk's blood and putting it into a skateboard.
And you only see the good ones.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's the thing. You only see the good ones. You don't see the people who got fired from the bad ones either that tried too much.
Or you don't see the really boring stuff that Liquid Death is doing really well.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't see like, oh, we optimized our landing pages with more backlinks and it created a 500% lift in our organic search.
Yeah, there's someone in product. There's someone in product that made a really cool can that no one thinks about. They'll never get the recognition.
Yeah.
Never.
Well, Tim, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I've learned a lot. I think this was great for especially our listeners who are tantalized by the flashy, sexy side of marketing and getting a harsh, cold reality of experimentation, the importance, and how much money it can bring to your organization. So thanks, man.
Thanks for having me. This is awesome.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll be back next month with another new episode of the Customer Engagement Lab. If you want to connect with Tim, you can follow him on LinkedIn. You can follow Tim Davidson on LinkedIn. You can find him at _Tim_the Tim Davidson, all underscores on TikTok.
Tim Davidson, you'll find like a blue profile picture.
That's it.
With glasses on like this.
And feel free to follow Directive as well, and you can learn more about his experiments and the cool stuff that they're doing. Anything else you want to plug? Did I miss anything?
I think my MySpace profile is still out there, so find that. That'd be cool.
Thanks for coming down to Florida and visiting us, and I am sorry you didn't get to see any dolphins. Hopefully you get to see some.
I got YouTube.
Later on your trip,
on YouTube.
on your next trip down.
Weather's the worst here.
Thanks, buddy. All right, everybody, take care. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Customer Engagement Lab, brought to you by PandaDoc. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or connect with us on LinkedIn. We love to hear from you and what you think of the show.